Hello, faithful, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis. And today we're going to be discussing the defensive coordinator search, obviously still ongoing with Robert Saleh being in the lead. We're going to have some discussions about comparing Brocks to some QBs who recently failed in the wild card round, because there's a lot of content creators out there and people that like to pile on Brock during the regular season and compare him. And then when the script is flipped, they take all sorts of offense and don't know how this fits into their agenda. So we're going to lend some objectivity and some perspective to that. And then net takeaways in terms of like, what are the criteria we're really using to judge a top 10 quarterback, an elite quarterback? Just takeaways from, again, that horrendous wild card weekend by some QBs that has gotten a lot of the Brock fans. I'm not a Brock fan. I'm a Brock neutral. Some fans and haters and people with agendas all up in arms. But let's get right into it. And let's start with the latest on the defensive coordinator search. And that is to say, there is really not much to discuss as of right now. And I'm recording this on Wednesday night. The 49ers have only interviewed Robert Saleh and Deshae Townsend, the Lions defensive backs coach. So at least with those two interviews, they satisfy the Rooney Rule, which mandates you must interview two outside minority candidates before making a decision. And the Niners got called on the carpet last week when Shanahan wanted to promote Clay Kubiak to offensive coordinator after he called plays week 18 against Arizona, not only because of that, but because of the work he's done with Kyle the past couple of years. And him announcing that got the 49ers into pseudo hot water, lukewarm water, and they are undergoing an offensive coordinator search. At the moment, they've actually interviewed a minority candidate from Iowa State's coaching staff, and I guess they need at least one more until they can officially hire Clay Kubiak. I mean, the Rooney Rule at heart, or it has its heart in the right place, I should say. Teams circumvent it easily. You have to wonder how these, candidates feel. Like anybody up in New England that interviewed for the Patriots head coaching position after Gerard Mayo got fired, everyone knew that Mike Vrabel was getting the position. So it's a waste of time for the candidates. It's a waste of time for the organization, similar to interviewing Jeff Ulbrich for the New York Jets head coaching position. I know it's a courtesy, but he was trash. He was an interim head coach. It's not like he led them to the playoffs or did anything positive, the last half of the season, the way Antonio Pierce did for the Raiders 2 years ago. And he got subsequently fired a week plus ago. But the Rooney Rule has its heart in the right place. And if the Niners really wanted to circumvent it, Kyle could have, even after announcing offensive coordinator, just not have promoted him and give him a different title, offensive special assistant with a pay bump representative of being an OC, and just be done with it, right? I guess that would have looked a bit shitty once the Niners got called out on it, that they didn't even try. But again, the interviewing of candidates has a benefit for getting people in the door into your organization in front of decision makers that they normally wouldn't be in front of for additional openings, maybe on the staff or in the future. So I know I keep saying its heart is in the right place. There's no downside. If we want to talk about wasting somebody's time, well, the candidate from Iowa State that interviewed to be the OC, he could have said no, but he wants to get his foot in the door somewhere, I guess, with a pro organization. And if that interview goes well, who knows what John or Kyle says to their colleagues around the league about this candidate. So no real downside, but it obviously just kind of has that feel of they're not taking some of these candidates seriously. And obviously Jeff Ulbrich being one of them for the Jets position, he's obviously not going to be the head coach. It feels like right now, again, as of Wednesday night, January 15th on the East Coast, it feels like this is a Salah or bust scenario. Although the bust isn't going to be someone like a Nick Sorensen. Again, they're not going to get caught with their pants down in terms of hiring a DC with no play calling experience. They're going to get somebody, but it feels like, right, that Robert Saleh is far and away the number one choice. And there's been rumors saying that if he doesn't become a head coach, then he's going to take the Niners position. It's all, I mean, unless that was leaked by his agent or Robert Saleh himself, it's all conjecture. It makes sense considering Robert Saleh's initial stint with San Francisco. But he's already interviewed with the Jaguars. He is going to interview with Dallas, and there's been rumblings that he could interview for the Las Vegas Raiders head coaching opening as well. Now, you saw the Jets fall off after him. They were not great to start the year. You know, his first 2 years weren't fantastic, yet last year he was dealt a bad hand with Aaron Rodgers getting hurt a couple plays into the season. But you saw the team perform worse without him. There was no interim head coach bump that teams get, any sort of energy juice, even with bringing in Adams from the Raiders to help out the passing game and Rodgers. Nothing at all seemed to work. And the defense regressed. The defense took a step back in New York. Granted, Joe Douglas, former general manager of the Jets, did no favors getting rid of, I think, half of his defensive line or not signing half of his defensive line in the offseason. I think where Robert Saleh scares people, and I'm not going to use the word scare for myself, but gives people pause, is would he leave if he doesn't get a head coaching position this year? Would he leave in a year? Next coaching cycle, he gets the Niners defense back on its feet, still a young candidate, still well-respected in NFL circles. Is he going to be a one and done in San Francisco and then Kyle's back here again next year? And I can understand that reservation. Now, if Kyle thinks, hey, with the pieces we have coming back, with a little bit more injury help, with another draft class and free agents, and it's a retool, it's not a reload. Don't let people misinform you. This is not a reload situation. Does he think that 1 year of making a Super Bowl run, even though John and Kyle have said in their exit press conference with everybody, end of season press conference, that they've never gone all in on any one season? And I believe that. They're never up against the salary cap. They have 55 plus million latest check. That's going to be, when you account the rollover for 2025, they're in the top, I think, 12 of cap space. The Patriots are a team that has, I think, like $120 plus million in cap space. But does Kyle think, all right, if we can get Robert Saleh, let's push our chips to the center of the table and make a run. We have a fourth place schedule. Let's get the football gods on our side. If you could hear me knocking, that's me knocking on wood because I'm Italian. And if they can get a little bit more health, perhaps 2025 could look more like 2022 and 23 and not like what we just saw this year. If anybody's wondering, and I'm sure you're not because I haven't said anything about it yet, but the whole compensatory pick rule for minority candidates becoming executives or head coaches, I read somewhere, and I could not find it doing research for this show, that a minority candidate would have to be with an organization for 2 years consecutively, going to another team to become a head coach, a GM, assistant GM, or whatever. And then that would net the team that he left 2 third-round picks. If Saleh stays for 1 year and leaves in 2026, I guess the Niners do not get a compensatory pick. It's not a reason to not hire Saleh. If you think he's only going to stay for 1 year, you hire the best coordinator for the team for the near term and the long term. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, right? I mean, I don't think someone like a Jeff Ulbrich or a Dennis Allen, we're going to talk about them momentarily, are going to be hot, sought after coaching candidates, especially Dennis Allen, since he's failed twice already, once with the Raiders and once with the Saints. But here's what Saleh did his last 2 years with the Niners as DC. In 2019, the Super Bowl year, in 2020. 2019, he was number 2 overall in defense, number 5 overall in 2020, which is impressive given the number of injuries that they had. Number 17th against the run in 2019. Surprising, bottom half of the league. 7th against the run in 2020. First against the pass in 2019. 4th against the pass in 2020. 8th in points allowed in 2019. 17th in points allowed in 2020. Kyle, John, we as fans know what Saleh brings. The principles of the cover three, the energy, obviously more aggressiveness than what Sorensen brought, and experience 4 years, 17, 18, 19, and 20 of being a defensive coordinator in San Francisco. He knows a lot of the players, has obviously a good relationship with everybody, would be a seamless fit. Now, he hasn't called plays since 2020. So that's, 4 years calling plays, 4 years not. We'll see. He seems to be the leader in the clubhouse. I would not be opposed to this hire at all. I just have reservations about his long-term tenure with San Francisco. And that's not to say that there aren't going to be qualified DC candidates next year, but it feels like, you're taking 2 steps forward if you hire him in 2025 to take 3, 4, 5 steps back in 2026 because he's so familiar with the scheme, because he's so familiar with the personnel, and having somebody new come in and follow that up. Catch 22, right? We'll see what Saleh decides to do. We'll see what Jacksonville, the Cowboys, the Raiders decide to do if they decide to offer him a job. Any one of those 3, I'm sure Saleh would probably take it. Jacksonville, think about it. It's a really appealing job. Houston in the playoffs, but only because every other team in that division is not that good. You walk in with a good running back, a good quarterback, some good weapons at receiver. He can get that team, that defense playing much harder. And it's a very winnable division, as good as we want to believe that the Texans are, and they're going to go to Arrowhead as a 7.5 point underdog this weekend. That's a winnable division for Saleh. The East, obviously the Eagles and Commanders are tough, and the Raiders, that should not be a place where Robert Saleh goes. It should be a first-time head coach, or maybe someone like an Arthur Smith, a very bland, like, hey, just be our head coach for a couple of years. We're going to suck. Who cares? Jacksonville, then Dallas, then San Francisco as DC, because obviously head coaching positions are more attractive and more lucrative. Jeff Ulbrich, if you want to say he's candidate number 2, I guess he is, because Kyle reached out to Saleh last offseason to try to get an interview and was denied. In his 2 years as DC, his last 2 years, 2022 and 2023, before becoming interim head coach, Jets were number 4 and number 3, respectively, overall defense. We're talking yards. Number 3 and number 2 pass defense in 2022 and 23. 16th against the run, 25th against the run in 2023. That's been the Jets' issue the past couple of years. 4th in points allowed in 2022 and 12th allowed in points in 2023. I think he's the number 2 candidate. He hasn't interviewed yet. I hope he's not waiting to hear back from the Jets, because you don't even need to wait. Obviously, there's interest there. An Ulbrich disciple, experience in the system. Energy guy like Saleh, not as much energy, but very animated on the sidelines. We need to tighten up the run. That was an issue with Sorensen. It can't be an issue under the next DC. You're not going to get a DC, I highly doubt, that's going to have this defense number 1 across the board. And they have someone in-house in Brandon Staley, who I'm not sure if he has or hasn't interviewed yet, but Kyle is going to give him an interview, that did have the Rams number 1 across the board in their Super Bowl season against the Bengals in 2021, but I don't want that. And third, and I'm really warming to the fact of Dennis Allen, former head coach, most recently of the Saints, but also of the Raiders, if you go back a few years. His last 2 years, and he was DC of the Saints for about 6 plus years under Sean Payton. In his last 2 years of being a DC in 2021, he had the Saints number 4 and number 7 overall. 4th both years in 20 and 2021 against the run. 5th and 15th against the pass. And 5th in points allowed in 2020 and 4th in points allowed in 2021. If Robert Saleh gets a head coaching job, I would be all for a Dennis Allen hire. Now, those Saints defenses had some pretty good talent on it. And the Superdome, at least for 8 or 9 games, or 8 games at that time in 2020 and 2021, is a tough place to play. Plus, they played in a division that at that time, I guess you did have, Well, you didn't have Brady, there until I guess 2022. The Saints, the Panthers, the Falcons, not a Bucks, Panthers, Falcons, not a great division in terms of offensive firepower that you're stopping, but that's only half your schedule, right? They have to play against another 8 teams. I think Dennis Allen, if any fan out there is looking for defensive stability, and we have no idea how he would work out, it's very encouraging how he ended his Saints tenure defensively. And when you look at the personnel he's going to inherit, decisions they have to make, like with a Greenlaw or a Hufanga, obviously Javon Hargrave is gone. Kyle Shanahan said that in the end of season press conference. They're going to designate him a June 1st cut so he can a post June 1st cut so he can latch on to another team before then, which is them doing Javon Hargrave a solid, even though they cut his, base salary, 80%. Dennis Allen could be Kyle Shanahan, Steve Spagnuolo, right? And not to the point that Spagnuolo and Spagnuolo interviewed with the Jets. That'd be a great way to get, if the Niners are going to make the Super Bowl, the Chiefs hurdle off a lot of people's backs in the NFC and AFC specifically. The Ravens, the Bills, the Chargers, the Texans. Dennis Allen is not going to, I don't care how, if they hire him, how good the Niners defense looks in the next 2 years. They could win back-to-back Super Bowls, shut teams out in the Super Bowl. I don't think Dennis Allen's getting another head coaching job. Mediocre or worse head coach, above average or very good defensive coordinator, at least most recently. So we'll see. I mean, San Francisco, there's no tremendous rush to hire or to interview, or really to hire when you think about it. They're still getting a month plus jump on the DC search compared to last year's Super Bowl run. And there's it's not that there's a shortage of DCs out there, right? No one's getting hired. There's no run on defensive coordinators out there in the league. So Kyle could still have his pick, right? With Mike McCarthy out in Dallas, that means Mike Zimmer. I don't know if he's going to be a candidate for the head coaching job in Dallas, but Zimmer's available. Schwartz could be available with an interview, a granted interview, and a promotion. Mike Pettin, someone like who's the former the Bengals former head coach for a long time. The name's escaping me now. Marvin Lewis. I don't know if he's officially retired, but he was a phenomenal DC. I mean, you're going back, 15 plus years with the Ravens, but he's a defensive-minded head coach, right? He interviewed for the Cowboys position a couple of years ago before McCarthy got it. I don't know if he's officially retired, but that could be someone that, Kyle gives a call to. There will be candidates out there. They're not going to be left holding the bag with Nick Sorensen, because that's essentially what it was after they couldn't get an interview with Ulbrich and Belichick turned them down last year. So Saleh, Ulbrich, Dennis Allen, watch. It's someone outside of those three. But we know it's not going to be, it should not be a first-time DC, and it should not be anyone on the staff, including Brandon Staley. So now let's talk about a hot button on topic on social media, because a lot of people that are Niner haters, Brock non-believers, Brock haters, Brock defenders, and somewhere in between, running that gamut. But wild card weekend saw Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, and Sam Darnold in that order lose first round games. And all quarterbacks that have had some discussion among actual media folks. And just because you're a professional media member or have a legitimate talk show or podcast, or you're a content creator doing this for fun or just posting on Twitter, everybody's opinion is the same. No one person is smarter than anybody else, right? Most people are saying stuff for views, for clicks, for engagement anyway. And obviously insulting someone like Brock Purdy, or if you're going to insult Josh Allen, the Lamar Jackson debate, or Burrow, or I'm not saying insulting those players, but casting doubt on how good or not good they are. And these, the last couple I mentioned, are elite quarterbacks. We know how good they are. But there was so much anti-Brock discourse on social, on the radio. I don't live in the Bay Area. I'm sure on the radio in the Bay Area, on TV because Brock and the entire Niner team had a down year, resulting in a 6-11 record. And a lot of folks, a lot of non-tent creators, and a lot of them are part of the Grant Cohn clown clique, were bashing Brock and comparing Brock to basically any quarterback under the sun, why they shouldn't pay Brock, and Brock's not that good, and he's a product of the system, and why isn't he carrying the team on his back, and he has no weapons, but he should be playing better, etc., etc., etc. And wild card weekend comes around, and Herbert, Love, Mayfield, and Darnold all shit the bed to varying degrees. And a lot of people out there turned on these very opinionated, but not too intelligent content creators and media folks. And they did not know what to do with it because it did not fit their agendas. The agenda was Brock not good, Sam Darnold better, trade for Darnold, Baker Mayfield cheaper, Baker better, get Baker in San Fran, like talking like a caveman. And I should have done my gurgly meathead knuckle dragging mouth breather voice from the Northeast. I'll remember to do that if the situation arises as we go through some of this stuff. But what happened in Wild Card Weekend did not fit these people's agendas, and they tried. They moved the goalposts. And I'm going to give, some reasons and things why, digging up some of their old tweets. The most shitty thing or tacky thing that somebody can do, not shitty, we'll go with tacky or weird, is quoting yourself on Twitter. Taking a screen grab or reposting your post and commenting about it, I think is so tacky. It's so tacky. I see it happen on LinkedIn a lot, and I'm not on it a ton, but people on LinkedIn, influencers, people that think they're more important than they are, will take a screen grab of their post on X, put it on LinkedIn, and whatever their post was, the content, the copy, the words of their post on X will be the copy of their post on LinkedIn. I'm like, what are we doing here? This is either you're scraping the bottom of the barrel for content, or you're just that lazy, or you think that highly of themselves. And the folks that are extremely vocal on social media, sports wise, have a very high opinion of themselves, especially when they get in with a pseudo media person like a Grant Cohn. And I still maintain the best part of him dripped out of his mother's ass and wound up being a stain on the floor of a gas station bathroom. But since they're running in that circle, in that clique, they think that they know more than they do. And their track record and their misery mongers, misery merchant dealing, peddling and negativity just kind of goes to show that. And this wild card weekend had them running. I don't want to say running scared, but they had no idea what to do with their narrative. Now, with all that, if you guys have been listening to the podcast or watching, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. If it's your first time, thank you also. And if you're listening 23 minutes in, I really appreciate it. Brock is not elite. Let's just get that out there. And if there's Niner fans out there that are saying that or thinking that, you're entitled to your opinion, but unfortunately your opinion is wrong. Brock is not elite, but that's okay. We can't remember the whole Eli Manning. You can't spell elite without Eli. He's not an elite quarterback, even on his best year or coming off of either one of his Super Bowl victories against the Patriots. Eli Manning was and is not an elite quarterback or elite retired quarterback. And it makes his Hall of Fame discussion extremely interesting. How much weight you're going to put I think those were his only 2 playoff runs, right? Were the Super Bowl runs. Maybe there was one more. I live in the Northeast, but I don't care about the Giants, so I'm not sure. Brock's not elite. If we want to use the word elite, we have to keep it to a small group of quarterbacks. Mahomes, Jackson, Allen, and Burrow. Those are your 4. And then if you want to have like a pseudo elite or excellent tier, 5th, I'll throw in Matthew Stafford. Stafford's interesting because he's still a very good quarterback. Last year, obviously, had some arm issues. He's paired with the right coach in Sean McVay, the right system. He's obviously got talent around him. Nakua and Kupp and Higbee and Kyron Williams. I know Higbee missed a lot of the season at tight end, but And we saw Stafford struggle mightily without his top two receivers, right? That's when the Rams were 1-4. Everybody needs talent, but he could be that next in-between tier of elite and very good quarterbacks, or excellent. Let's just put Stafford there because he has the ring. That matters. He was not a Pro Bowl quarterback in Detroit ever, which is shocking when you think about it. Some of the numbers he put up. Only a Pro Bowl quarterback in Los Angeles, but still a very good quarterback. And there's a decent chance that maybe the Niners would have had a ring if, Kyle was able to pry him away from Detroit instead of the Rams. We'll never know. But if that's 5 quarterbacks, Mahomes, Jackson, Allen, Burrow, and Stafford, for now, let's say, I don't know who number 6 is. You could knock yourself out having that argument, over a beer or over water, whatever you're drinking. But Brock is in the 7 to 12 range. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You have your top 6, 7 through 12. That's your next tier. And there's nothing wrong with that. And a top 7 quarterback gets paid. A top 9 quarterback gets paid. A top 11 quarterback gets paid. And I understand people, you can't pay a top, a quarterback that's maybe 9th, 10th, 11th best in the league, top 5 money. Tough shit, guys. That's the way the market works. My next door neighbor, their house is a Cape Cod. Small house. It's the same house I live in. Obviously in the Northeast. Went for over $625,000 for that house. Its market and location in terms of real estate, that same house in Arkansas probably goes for less than half price, right? So there are factors that drive up the price in things. And with quarterbacks, it's the fact that there's only 32 starting jobs on the planet. And if you have someone that's in a top 9, top 12 range, you do what you can to hold on to them, and you do what you can to structure the contract. And I know Parag Marath and John will do this to potentially get out of it if things go south in a couple of years. But regardless, the Niners have the cap space to afford them. They have their superstars signed under contract. I believe they'll extend the Kittle. They'll extend Fred Warner and keep him surrounded by good players because Mahomes, I know he's had some difficulties lately in terms of the offense, but he's been surrounded by good players for the majority of his career. Oh, and has Steve Spagnuolo as a DC. Lamar Jackson, uber talented, but has had good players around him. Maybe not the great wide receiving core, good tight ends, generally good defense, good running game. Josh Allen has had good offense. Josh Allen, again, and I've said this before, Josh Allen has gotten better when Joe Brady became the OC and they took the ball out of his hands and gave it more to James Cook. That's just a fact. Just a fact. He might not be putting up the ridiculously gaudy numbers, but he's a better quarterback, a more decisive, less reckless quarterback. Who'd have thought a running game is important to a quarterback, right? Burrow's had weapons. Stafford has weapons. Every great quarterback has weapons, guys. That's why that narrative just falls on deaf ears. And Brock is a quarterback, obviously coming into the league, 7th round pick. Not much is expected. He's got a postseason record of 4-2. That includes the Eagle game. So 4-1 in games that he was healthy enough to start and finish and not get injured. And he jumped into the deep end his rookie year. First game was what? More than halfway through the season against the Dolphins. Played in maybe 6 or 7 regular season games before getting to the postseason. His first postseason game at home against Seattle, all Brock did was go 18 for 30 for 332, 3 touchdowns through the air, 1 on the ground, and 16 yards on 4 rushes. Rookie playoff debut. Next game against Dallas, that was that kind of, low-scoring barn burner defensive struggle where Kittle makes that nice, one-hand catch where he tipped it to him near midfield. Against a good Dallas defense, 19 of 29, 214, 3 rushes for 8 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. So he counted for 4 touchdowns in 2 games, his first postseason, no interceptions. That matters, guys. That matters. Postseason record, and obviously had a good run this past postseason, leading him back against the Packers, against the Lions, and leaving the field at the end of the 4th and in overtime with a 3-point lead against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and the Niners just couldn't seal the deal. Rookie quarterback in 2022, the moment was nowhere near too big for him. Nowhere near too big, and we'll never know what could have happened against the Eagles because his UCL exploded. But then you have someone like Justin Herbert, who has an 0-2 playoff record. Big, statuesque, powerful arm. Can throw it 60 yards. Can throw 35-yard outs on a rope. 0-2 playoff record. Was not a rookie in 2022 at Jacksonville. Put up 273 and a touchdown. Remember, they were up 27-0. His defense, the Chargers defense, caused 4 interceptions, and they still lost 31-30. Chargers scored 3 points in the second half. Got outscored 31-3 after being up 27-0. Is that all on Justin Herbert? No, but got to score more than 3 points in the second half when you feel the momentum, when you feel Jacksonville at home coming back. And then, of course, what we all saw this past weekend at Houston, 14 of 32, 242, 1 touchdown, and 4 interceptions. They could run the ball, 18 for 50 yards running. 2 of his so he threw 4 interceptions. 2 of them, people want to excuse, off wide receivers' hands. One was high, very high to Ladd McConkey, and one was catchable, but outside the tight end, Will Dissly, that went right into the defensive player's hands for a pick 6. And then let's also not forget, I think was the first or second interception, was a terrible rolling to his left, throwing back across his body deep, that was intercepted, and still had a 4th interception on top of that. People that are defending Justin Herbert or that want to push down the Brock Purdy and Herbert postseason comparison. Well, 2 of those interceptions should have been caught. They went off of receivers' hands. Did Brock Purdy get any grace, any benefit of the doubt from folks, I don't want to say other than me, for his Christmas night 4-interception game against the Ravens when 3 of those picks were tipped? The first pick was a bad read, throwing into the end zone late, and the corner stepped in front of it. Otherwise, got hit when he threw one to McCaffrey, and the other 2 were batted, tipped, an interception. Did Brock get the benefit of the doubt there? No. So Justin Herbert doesn't either at all. But Justin Herbert did it on a bigger stage. If you want to say Christmas night against Lamar and it's Brock and Lamar battling for the MVP last year was a big stage, sure. Different than playoff football, though. Justin Herbert, 0-2, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions in 2 playoff games. Now, he had a great regular season, right? 3,870 yards, completed 66% of his passes, 23 touchdowns, 3 interceptions on the season. 3 interceptions in the regular season. He threw 4 against the Texans defense, which is not a world beater defense. And now what else were people saying about Justin Herbert? Well, he doesn't have the weapons. He's forcing the ball to Ladd McConkey. You had a great year, over 1,000 yards. I mean, when generally someone's got to be your number one, right? Was it Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer? You have Ladd McConkey. Obviously, you're running the ball with Dobbins and Gus Edwards a whole lot. So he didn't have, his typical 30-plus touchdown performance, but good enough to get him in the playoffs, right? Was anyone using Justin Herbert's highly efficient year, 23-3? Anyone saying that he had a lack of weapons then? Anyone saying that, maybe someone saying, well, imagine if he had weapons. Maybe he would have been 32-5, 32-6. If you're not going to use the excuse, we're not going to complain about it in the regular season. When things are going well, don't complain about it when things are going bad. Justin Herbert, if you want to throw him as the 6th or 7th, 8th, whatever best quarterback you can, but it's on regular season. It's on his look, the prototype, the arm, the wow throws. Wow throws do not make a wow quarterback. Wow runs do not make a wow quarterback. It's a summation of multiple things that people don't want to hear and people don't want to talk about because it's not sexy. But this is where a little bit of objectivity and a little bit of perspective come in. Now, if you poll GMs and you ask, all 32 GMs or 31 and coaches outside of Kyle Shanahan, who would they want, Herbert or Brock Purdy? They'll probably pick Herbert because people are still going to go towards that prototypical quarterback mold. And people will hold back Kyle Shanahan's play calling against Brock Purdy and the weapons he has, although we've stated that great quarterbacks need great weapons, but maybe Justin Herbert doesn't, right? 23 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Maybe he doesn't until you get into the playoffs, until it matters, until your running game doesn't perform less than 3 yards a carry, 18 for 50, and he's got to put the team on its back. And it's not like the Texans were blowing them out from the jump. They weren't. It was a game into the second half. And Justin Herbert threw it away. Now, almost not to be undone, Jordan Love didn't quite say hold my beer, but it was close. Maybe take a gander at my beer. Jordan Love, I know a lot of people are high on him. A lot of people will take him over Brock Purdy. Jordan Love of the 1-2 playoff record. Really good game against the Cowboys last playoffs. Has shit the bed since. Versus the Eagles this past weekend, 20 of 33, 212, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Now, the Brock Purdy haters and the Jordan Love apologists, because you can't compare the two, because one's got the measurables and it's got the big arm and throws off his back foot and looks like Brett Favre sometimes. Here's the excuse. Well, they lost Christian Watson the week before. They were down a receiver. And then in the second half, Romeo Doubs, another receiver, went down. So Love didn't have, his weapons. Now, again, this was a game that was close. What was it, a 22-10 final? This was a game that was close. You still have Josh Jacobs, right? You still have Tucker Kraft. You still have Jaden Reed. You have players. And I know that the Eagles are the number one defense. And if some people are going to say, oh, you have no weapons going up against the number one defense, then if Jordan Love is as good as everyone says he is, or is projecting him to be, then he has to overcome that, right? If we want to put him in the next category under elite, then he's got to at least show that he can overcome that and not throw 3 interceptions and no passing touchdowns. And again, let's go back to the weapons issue. If the standard or the argument is that Brock needs to perform without weapons, what about Jordan Love against Philadelphia, right? Why can't Love elevate the team? If Jordan Love is that good and that precise, that accurate, that cerebral, that much pocket presence and awareness, why is it a no touchdown, 3 interception performance, right? Why? Give me the reason. Or if the reason is, it's what you said, it's the injury thing, and they went up against a good defense, then we're knocking Jordan Love down multiple pegs. You can go up against a good defense without your weapons and maybe throw one touchdown and 1 interception, not a goose egg and 3, right? There's degrees of badness. There's degrees of ineptitude when it comes to going up against a good defense or maybe working a bit shorthanded. This was a bed shitting, much like Justin Herbert's. But let's go back to last year's playoffs against the Niners. Love was 21 of 34, 194, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 2 bad interceptions, both to Greenlaw, 1 in the third, and the icing on the cake in the fourth quarter, rolling to his right, throwing across his body, and Dre intercepts it in midfield when all Green Bay needed was a field goal to tie the game. Here's Brock in that game against Jordan Love in the rain, just like Jordan Love, 23 of 39, 252, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, 6 for 14. Brock didn't have statistically a stellar performance, but keeping drives alive, coming back in the second half, much like against the Lions, Brock was a reason, if not the reason, they won that game or those games. Make no mistake about it, Jordan Love was the reason the Packers lost against San Francisco last year and the reason the Packers lost against the Eagles. You want to say compounding factors of injuries at receiver and Eagles defense? That's fine. They were leaning on the running game. They were running it okay. And it was a close game, and Love choked it away. Jordan Love's last 6 playoff quarters, second half against the Niners in the full Eagle game, no touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Baker Mayfield, I probably should have led with him because of the 4, he's had the best playoff resume. He's threw over 40 touchdowns in the regular season, did lead the league in interceptions with 16, but he's had 2 good postseasons. This past weekend against Washington, only threw it 18 times, which was surprising. 15 of 18. Washington really controlled the ball in time of possession. 185 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Mayfield wasn't the reason why they lost, right? Last season against the Eagles at home, wild card, where the Eagles were just in free for all, but still, Mayfield went 22 of 36, 337, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. The next week against Detroit in a shootout, 26 of 41, 349, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And what was it? 2020, the COVID year when he was with the Browns, he had a really good game against the Steelers. Remember, they got up huge, like 28-0, 35-0, something like that in Pittsburgh, and wound up holding on for the victory. Mayfield has played well in the postseason, but he hasn't got past the divisional round. Detroit, that was a winnable game for them. Washington this past weekend was a winnable game for them. And quarterbacks take too much blame and get too much praise. And we're going to talk about criteria for what we're judging, really any quarterback on. Elite, very good, Hall of Fame, not. Brock's 2-0 versus Baker. 2-0 versus Baker and his Bucks. In 2022, his rookie year, Brock went 21 of 25, 333, 3 touchdowns. In 2023. 21 of 25, 333, 3 touchdowns and no interceptions versus Baker's 29 of 45, 246, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. I wrote 2022 down in my notes, but that would have been Brady's last year. This was 2023. 2024, this season, Brock went 25 of 36, 353, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Baker was 18 of 29, 116, 1 touchdown, and no picks at home. So Brock's averaging about 340 through the air, 5 total touchdowns against Baker and the Bucks, where Baker's averaging basically $160 or $170 with 2 total touchdowns and 1 interception. Yeah, this isn't tennis. It's not Baker versus Brock. It's not golf. But head-to-heads matter to some people, right? I mean, they matter. The Niners and Chiefs matter. Those head-to-heads, they were for the Super Bowl too, but it's Kyle and Jimmy against and Brock against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. A lot of teams in the AFC can't get over that head-to-head matchup with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So that does matter, but kudos to Mayfield. And we're going to talk about his salary and salary cap hit in a second, but let's not forget Sam Darnold, who showed the last 2 weeks he cannot play when it matters most. Whether he's still seeing ghosts from his Jets days, whether he does not have the calm in the pocket when things are going wrong, and a whole lot went wrong the last 2 weeks, right? And going back to Brian Baldinger a month or so ago saying he'd flip him for Brock Purdy now at that time, when again, Sam Darnold is not under contract with the Vikings. Baldinger went a step farther saying the Niners should call the Vikings in the offseason to see what it would take to get Sam Darnold. Well, the answer would be, yeah, he's a free agent. You could bet on him. Have a little bit of knowledge, folks. And now Brian Baldinger walked that back. It's like, oh, when I said that at the time, it was because of the salary and Sam was making $10 million and Brock. Well, if it was at the time, Sam's making $10 million, Brock's making $1 million. Don't walk back your bullshit. Own it. Own it. I'm wrong a lot. Ask my wife. I'm wrong a lot. Own it. No one's going to slap you through your computer. There's going to, maybe some trolls are just going to maybe stay on you and tweet little nasty sentences at you. So what? You're wrong. You own it. You move forward. Something that the Cone Clown Clique cannot do. They cannot own to their mistakes and their really bad takes, and it makes them a joke or unreliable in terms of any takes moving forward. But 2 weeks ago against Detroit, pseudo playoff game for the number 1 seed, for a bye, for home field advantage, 18 of 41, 166, no touchdowns, no interceptions. They lose 31-9. This past Monday against the Rams, 25 of 40, 245, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, sacked 9 times. This is a Viking team that outran the Rams rushing yards wise, and they still lose 27-9. Sacked 9 times. You could see he was not settled in the pocket, right? And I refuse to believe, I didn't watch the all 22, but let's assume, right? Not every single play or all 9 sacks was there not someone open, whether he got off of his read, he went through his reads too quickly, didn't get to the read that was open, felt the pressure. Once you get to sack 4, 5, or 6, the quarterback's eyes are dropping down to the rush. They are. And Sam Darnold, even though he's a veteran, still hasn't played enough good football. Enough outside of this year with Minnesota, regular season only, except for week 18. He hasn't played in enough big games or games that matter that he has the awareness and knowledge reservoir to tap into and get himself calm. They were able to run the ball against the Rams. Darnold didn't throw the game away. He had a pick actually and a fumble that was a scoop and score. So he cost his team directly 7 points. But get this, on his 9 sacks, he lost 82 yards. Brock lost 156 yards on sacks all season. I don't know what that stat means. It's just a fun one to throw out there. But for Darnold, he cost himself a lot of money, right? No one in their right mind, honestly, would have taken Sam Darnold over Brock Purdy anytime this year. You're talking about a quarterback that just came off the Super Bowl and a quarterback in Darnold who's starting his first playoff game and couldn't cut it the week before in a pseudo playoff game. Cost himself a lot of money. Now, in Kevin O'Connell's post-game presser, he didn't speak ill of Sam Darnold, but I don't think he gave him a glowing endorsement. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I mean, they still have J.J. McCarthy. I'm sure teams are going to call. You're going to figure out the Sam Darnold stuff quickly. I mean, they have 6 weeks to sign him before free agency starts. And if they sign him to anything but a 1-year deal, then yeah, maybe the J.J. McCarthy trade thing is on the table. But if you like McCarthy and you still believe in him, don't you need to back him in this league? Sure. And if you believe in him, the bonus is he's a cheap backup. So they don't have to go into free agency. I guess they still have Nick Mullins and Daniel Jones, I guess, factors into this Sam Darnold equation as well. Do they let Darnold walk? Sign Daniel Jones to a Sam Darnold like 1-year, $10 million contract and let he and McCarthy duke it out? You saw what Sam Darnold can do in the regular season with those weapons, and it was impressive, right? It was really a bounce back. He should be the comeback player of the year for the nothing that he's been so far throughout his career to what he put together. And then it all came crashing down in 2 games. That's the major red flag. Can they get any farther with Sam Darnold? On top of the fact that this is now going to be a team that's going to lose Brian Flores to some head coaching opening, I would imagine. So the defense is going to look different. I'm sure they're going to try to, maybe they'll promote someone internally or find someone to bring that same type of attacking downhill defense, but it's going to be different. It's going to be different. And if Darnold goes to a QB needy team, and I don't know if or think any of these will happen, but let's just throw them out there. The Jets, the Giants, the Browns, we'll say the Colts, even though they have Anthony Richardson, the Raiders, who are not in a position to draft a quarterback at least high. They could wait until the second round or take someone later on in the first, like the Broncos did with Bo Nix. Darnold goes to a bad team. Bad team equals bad Darnold. He's going to revert in a crazy way. So that's why, other than the Vikings signing him to a modest deal, I wouldn't even give Sam Darnold a modest deal. I would not even give him a Baker Mayfield-like deal. Because if he's going to go to a team devoid of weapons, and the Raiders might be the most talent devoid team in the NFL. If he goes to a team like that, or even a team with marginally better talent than the Raiders, and is expected to be the starting quarterback, it's going to look bad. Now, in terms of takeaways, these 4 quarterbacks, talking about their average annual value. We just talked about Sam Darnold at $10 million for 1 year. Baker, when he signed his extension with the Bucs, averaging $33 million a year. You have Justin Herbert at $52 million a year and Jordan Love at $55 million a year. Just for numbers. And this is not to vindicate Brock or any way, or show you the numbers or the math to say, see, Brock deserves that. Brock deserves just as much. I'm just doing it to show you what these quarterbacks, and Darnold as the anomaly, because that was a 1-year prove-it deal. The reason why Baker Mayfield got $33 million a year only is because he's on his 4th friggin' team. Right? The Browns, the Rams, the Panthers, and the Bucs. If Mayfield had last year's season or this year's season, and he was still with the Browns, and now he was coming up on his last year under contract, he would get a $50 million contract. He would. But the fact that he was deemed damaged goods, again, multifactorial, a lot that goes into how much a quarterback's worth, as we're going to see with Sam Darnold, because of his first 6 years, 5 or 6 years in the league, then this 1 year in Minnesota, which was good, and the last 2 years, which everybody saw because it was on national television. And it's still Sam Darnold, and he's still in a really good spot in Minnesota, and no spot is going to be as good. Can we agree on that? If he goes anywhere else, no spot that needs a quarterback will be as good as what he has in Minnesota, which means he is not going to perform the way he did this year. I know you guys know that, but I like saying it because it's true. But what are we doing here? Like with the average annual values, or in terms of, what Herbert and what Love got is still what I think the neighborhood that Brock's going to get. And I don't care about the measurables. He doesn't have the howitzer of an arm. What are we putting more stock in, right? Regular season numbers or postseason success? I'm sure it's both. It's got to be both. I mean, if you're going to weight one more than the other, postseason success, because that's what you're playing for, right? You're playing for a ticket to the dance. You're playing for a chance at the ring, or the trophy in this case. Well, they get rings. You're going to get both. You're playing for that. And when you see how Brock performed his first 2 years in the playoffs, the moment's not too big for him. Or you have a really good idea, really strong assertion that he could lead your team, in this case, the Niners, to the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship game, because he did it already. You can't say that about Lugg. You can't say it about Herbert. You can't say it about Mayfield, and you sure as hell can't say it about Darnold. Guys, Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson's going to lose this weekend. They're playing each other. The narrative of either one of those quarterbacks not being able to advance in the playoffs is just going to get louder. And I don't care if Lamar gets his 3rd MVP or Josh Allen gets his 1st. Whoever loses that game is going to be looked at differently. Because again, too much blame, too much praise. And these are 2 elite quarterbacks going at it. So they're the headliners. The Ravens, it's Lamar and Derrick Henry's right there. With the Bills, it's Josh Allen, and then you have a gap or a chasm. Like, who are you putting number 2? I guess it's James Cook. But that's not an excuse if the Ravens win. There's no excuse, and the Ravens waxed them pretty good earlier on in the season. But the narrative of an Allen or a Jackson coming up short again in the playoffs is only going to get louder. And people will forget about it when the regular season starts in 2025 and they put up each one of them has a great run, or they run over someone, or they throw it 60 yards, or, they're such a great quarterback. And they are a great quarterback. They are elite quarterbacks. But postseason success matters. And one's going to be silenced. That discussion is going to be silenced for at least a week. And we're assuming that the winner of this game is going to go to Kansas City and take on Mahomes. And then that quarterback, if it is true that they're playing Mahomes, will have every chance to silence the doubters. Is it supporting talent, right? Are we using so regular season success, postseason success, supporting talent on their team? Brock this year, down year, given what everything happened, offense, defense, special teams, coaching, down year across the board. What Love did against the Eagles without Watson, or how poorly he performed without Watson. Romeo Doubs going out. Darnold, what he's going to look like if he's not a Minnesota Viking. That's a fact. That's a factor also. But you don't have to go too far. I mean, it's not too far back in my history. I'm not going back to Sonny Jurgensen, but Dan Marino, right? Brock Purdy's idol, the reason why he wears number 13, only got to one Super Bowl against the Niners in 84, and they lost. But guess what Dan Marino also had? Only one player ever to run for 1,000 yards with the Dolphins during his time as the Dolphins quarterback. And it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, running back also out of UCLA, like the basketball player Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. John Elway got to 3 Super Bowls. Probably the Josh Allen of the 80s. Had good weapons at receiver. Generally had a good defense. Got routed in those 3 Super Bowls. Routed by the Giants, the Redskins, and the Niners. When did he win his 2 Super Bowls? When Terrell Davis got there. Terrell Davis, the MVP of the league, MVP of one of the Super Bowls, 2,000-yard rusher. And oh, by the way, they still had talent in terms of Rod Smith and Ed McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's father at receiver, Shannon Sharp at tight end, and Mike Shanahan as the head coach and offensive coordinator. Troy Aikman's in the Hall of Fame. Does he win any one of his 3 Super Bowls without Emmitt Smith, without Michael Irvin, without Alvin Harper, without Jay Novacek, without that O-line and without that defense? No. You could probably say outside, you take Emmitt Smith away, they probably don't win 3 Super Bowls. You take Michael Irvin away, they don't win 3 Super Bowls. Take the O-line away or the defense, a lessened defense, less star-studded, dominant defense, they don't win those 3 Super Bowls. So the narrative about the talent is correct. Quarterbacks or teams generally perform better when they have better talent. No shit. What are we talking about, folks? What are we talking about, really, when that's held as a negative for Brock? I'm going to conclude the podcast with this, and I've said this before, and I truly believe this. There are people that are Brock doubters. I don't want to say that they hate Brock, but there are definitely people out there that are Trey Lance fans or wanted Trey Lance to succeed so badly that they have something against Brock. And they're Niner fans, right? These people still exist. I know because I see it on Twitter, X, social media. I think they've dwindled. I think they've come to their senses, right? But they wanted to be right on Trey. NFL evaluators, GMs, people in the media, fans out there, they want to be right on the first round pick, the highly touted, highly acclaimed, generally with elite measurables, first round quarterback. They get every opportunity to fail. They get multiple opportunities to throw multiple interceptions, to get killed in the playoffs, to not perform. How many lives does Sam Darnold had? How many teams has he been on? What is he? He's on his 4th now. Baker Mayfield's on his 4th. I'm sure Trey Lance will get another shot. Quarterbacks, because first round quarterbacks, or quarterbacks in general, but first round quarterbacks, they get more lives than a cat because every coach and GM out there thinks they're going to be the one that's going to unlock the talent because they have the talent. We'll harness it the right way. But at some point, if you haven't seen it after X number of years, you're never going to see it. That's why Darnold's year this year with the Vikings is an anomaly, and he's going to turn back into a pumpkin. It's going to strike 12 for Darnold-Arella. The coach is going to turn into a VW bug, and he's going to become the player that everybody knows him historically to be. And the later round picks do not get that much grace because, yeah, we were right about you. You might have had that one good year, but this is who you truly are. The number one picks, you'll see, they'll rise above it because that's who they truly are. You'll see. It'll happen. It'll happen with team 2. Oh, that's a bad situation. It'll happen with this team 3. X, Y, and Z went wrong. Justin Herbert didn't have the right coach in Brandon Staley. Now he's got a running game and a good defense and a good coach in Harbaugh, and he completely craps out with 4 interceptions. Oh, but it's the talent. It's the talent, which didn't hinder him in the regular season. There's always an excuse for the first-round pick quarterback. There's no excuses for the Brock Purdy's of the world, the Tony Romos, the Kurt Warners. I mean, he got his Super Bowl. Once he got that Super Bowl, his first year, technically as a rookie, was he a rookie with the Rams? Because he might have been on the Packers training camp roster a year or two before that. But with his first year with the Rams, solidified his place, got back there with the Rams, got there with the Cardinals of all franchises, and should have won it against the Steelers. Long-winded way of, here's the part I truly believe with that preface. If Brock did nothing differently in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, didn't complete another pass, didn't run for 10 more yards, didn't throw another touchdown, nothing different, same stat line, he leaves the field the same way in the fourth quarter, up 3, and the Niners get a stop in the fourth, or leaves the field in overtime, up 3, and the Niners get a stop on that 4th and 1. The rhetoric, the perspective, the opinion, the talk around Brock is completely different because he's a Super Bowl champion. Think about that. And I know I've said it before, but to me, this is so important. Think about it. If Brock does nothing different, and the only difference in the game is the defense getting a stop in the fourth or overtime, Brock is celebrated by the Lance haters. Brock gains a whole lot more credibility by the media or the other people that doubted him because he would have went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes and out-dueled him. When in reality, it was one defense maybe out-dueling another when the chips are down in the fourth and overtime. The narrative would be different, and that's absurd. Win or lose, Brock left it all on the line. Did he miss throws? Yes. Did he throw an interception? No. Mahomes did. Mahomes threw 2 picks in the first game against the Niners in 2019. Another pick to start the third quarter that unfortunately the Niners did nothing with it because, I don't want to say because they left it in Brock's hands, but Shanahan decided to abandon the run for a bit, up 10-3. But if Brock had got, the ring is the thing, guys. The ring is the thing. And if Brock had gotten it last Super Bowl by doing nothing different, the discussion around him and if he's worth $50+ million, it's quiet. It's a nothing burger, and that's absurd. So that concludes the podcast for today and probably this week, unless the Niners hire a defensive coordinator in the next couple of days. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening routine. Best weekends. I mean, everyone says, divisional weekend's the best weekend of the year. It's great. And the fact that there's 2 games Saturday, 2 games Sunday. I think championship game weekend is so fun because when a team wins it on their home field, the celebration is so much better, more energy, more emotional than that, at the Super Bowl. Because the Super Bowl is so sterile, so, devoid of having the majority of fans, nighttime, cold weather on your home field. That, listen, I just love the fact that it's playoff football, even if the Niners aren't in it. Enjoy the games. I think we have 4 very interesting games, to say the least. We're probably the home team should come out on top in all 4. We'll speak again. I'm not sure how early in the week we will have our next podcast. I think I'm down to a 1 podcast a week rotation now, or frequency now that it's the off season. But if there is a week, if I do a podcast Monday and they hire a DC on Wednesday, I'll have a podcast on Thursday to talk about it. And in future upcoming podcasts, we're going to be talking about I'm going to be ranking the Niners offensive and defensive free agents on who they should bring back and who they should walk. But given what we saw from those 4 quarterbacks I mentioned, and you may have seen it on the image that may have accompanied this video, Brock's bitches, at least for now, guys, if you can't flip the narrative, just shut up and talk about something else. Thanks again for listening and watching. Stay happy, healthy, and safe. We will talk soon. Take care.